for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumine, beloved divine.
So hello there everyone, and welcome to this mini video installment with me here today. I want to make a shorter video on the continuation of this topic of self-healing, but through the higher principles of understanding that we're not just healing in a one way, in one specific way, like physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, but that this is actually a multi-layered, multifaceted, multidimensional process, and I'm going through this process as we speak. So if you haven't been with me, you haven't been present with the recent videos I've been sharing and about these experiments that I actually volunteered or agreed upon from the higher galactic perspective to sort of become trained in this advanced understanding of the nature of the physical human body, all the principles that it holds, that, you know, also we can use as sovereign Christ being. Oh, I have to warn you, there's a lot of ants, the big ones here, and I'm barefoot, so if I make a little bit of the it's not that I'm being electroshocked, but I actually have these mini shocks with biting ants. I like to be barefoot, so thank you for understanding that part of the wilderness here in nature. So I was trying to capture the waterfall behind me. I don't know if I managed, because, you know, I'm a one-woman team right now, but I want to still, even though the conditions are such, want to make a short video about these principles, and I want to share some insights I had today as I was hiking here, spending a lot of time in meditation. I go here a lot now with the waterfall, and today was interesting because I actually talked to an acquaintance of mine, a doctor friend, and she was actually starting to tell me all of a sudden about the way cancerous cells and normal cells function. So she was telling me about, we talked about the communication systems, right, in the body, and she was telling me about the cells, right, and how they communicate. And I mentioned her just recently, I actually bought Bruce Lipton's book for my mom's birthday, and she's reading it, you know, this understanding of consciousness and biology as one, and how the cells interact with the environment, and, you know, oh, lots of ants that are also interacting with me here today. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about what she kind of told me. Ow! So many ants, right? And what she actually told me about the way the cancerous cells work in the body, kind of like in a very easy, down-to-earth perspective that anyone can understand. There's no scientific knowledge needed. And I think we've all been learning a lot about that in schools, but this is kind of like an interesting way she's been telling me about this today. So basically, cancerous cells are very aggressive, right? We all know that. So they're kind of acting like, hello, white butterfly. We have a whole team here today, right? We have a whole auditorium full of nature beings and other beings, spirit beings and divas and Divi Kingdom. So she was telling me how these cells are actually traveling, right? They're moving through the body, which normal cells, except for the bloodstream, they do not. And how they're very aggressive. You know, they want all the food to themselves. They want everything, right? So they're actually kind of ruining their host, right? And it's funny, right? They want this for themselves and all this attention, but at the end they end up just killing their host, which is interesting, right? It's not really intelligent. But normal cells, right, they have this natural defense mechanism which would say, this is my space, right, and you don't come in my space. But they have this intelligence. But the way the cancer cells actually operate, this is what she told me, is they will fool the intelligence of the cells, right, making them believe that they're not really harmful cells. So this is how cancer starts spreading, because in truth we all have different cells in the body, even cancerous cells. And the problem is when normal cells that function in this natural communicative way in our innate biology in the body, they start to respond in a way, so they're actually fooled, right? And I was thinking, what a beautiful analogy this is to a greater cell and the greater cellular organism that we're playing here as humanity, and what we're now calling this dark versus light, or the battle of dark versus the light, or evil, you know, versus good. and reptilian forces versus, you know, forces of the light and all of that. And it's interesting because they have a same mannerism, right, of operating. So they're very aggressive. They're kind of working through the art of deception. You know, this quote in the Bible that the greatest trick Satan ever performed was kind of convincing everyone that it doesn't exist, right? I think it's one of the famous quotes from the Bible. So it's like interesting, right, when we think about it this way, when we are deceived in anything and we're not perceiving that as a threat. So it's basically the darkness in any kind of form, right, starting from the tiny microorganisms and from the cells, and spreading further out into the collective cells, right, that we are all as humanity, how everything functions in the same way, right? And it's basically this art of deception, you know. And when you embrace something as a host and you take it in, basically it starts to infiltrate and it starts to become one. And then this aggressive nature eventually starts to override the normal functioning principles of the body, of the cells, right, and the communication mechanisms. So it's interesting, the same thing is playing out at the greater collective level, us as a collective human cell, right, or organism that has different cells that are all of us as individual humans. So this makes perfect sense how as above, so below is also reflected in this. I wanted to mention this today as well because for us to move into the healing principle of the Christ and through the Christ and have this understanding, it means, right, we need to illuminate through this deception, through this false light, right? The image that the darkness projects is of itself being benevolent, but it's not. So we see this in the workings of our leading systems, right? The elites, the governmental systems, all of that. We're seeing there's this great deception being played out, how they're actually our protectors and they want good to us and for us. And they're creating most of the problems on the planet, and they come up with solutions, and, you know, they're coming up as saviors, but they're truly not, because they're the ones who originated the problem anyway. So the only thing for us to do is first, right, becoming aware of our own cellular organism and our own awareness in the body, is bringing more light. And light is, of course, information. And then we've talked about how to hold the space of love. So when we're bringing light in, we're informing the body so that the cells can remember once again how it is to be and exist within the Illumined Light principle. So for me, that is what the Christ stands for. This is the principle of Illumined Light. Because even certain amounts of light, right, we've talked about, can be false light, truly. So they're using the art of deception and mimicking and holographic imaging projection, and there's so many things, like from micro to macro, right? But starting with ourselves, right, and our body. So what my experience is teaching me is that first I had to see through it. I first had to see who these deceptive forces are, because when I shared my experiences with you, these beings, these alien beings, wanted me to believe that they're actually the good doers, right? So sorry guys, I had to switch environments because my phone overheated, so it stopped recording, and we're here now. So I'm going to go back to the topic, right, of how we need to see beyond these deceptive forces that will infiltrate our environments, from cellularly, right, to bigger collective picture of life. And it starts within. That is why this healing, which is multidimensional, is required for us as sovereign Christ beings on all levels. So going back to healing, right, healing is not just on one level, right? We've talked about how healing is actually a spiraling of, you know, it's like, for me, where I'm now, it's not that I'm just healing myself through the self, but it's also anchoring these higher gifts of healing, these higher healing abilities, not just self-healing, but multispectral, right? Healing on all levels, multidimensional healing, which, you know, when you first start doing it yourself, even I thought at first, oh, it's going to be like this, and I'm going to do it like this, and that kind of routine, and this kind of meditations. But it's actually just this connection to divine light body intelligence, which every day when you show up and you hold the space through love, it's going to show you different facets, right? It's going to show you what needs to be done this day. So it's interesting, right? Because we just talk about these infiltrations so much now, and now addressing it from the cellular level up, right? I wanted to share my experience from yesterday, because suddenly through this power of the spiral and, just being entranced into this meditation, I was suddenly called and really deeply pulled to start commanding these foreign energies that have once been, planted in my body. I still feel them, right? They're still influencing my body, and they're still making painful reactions. They're causing them. They still have these side effects. And I've been battling this battle. It's not really a battle, but it's quite a journey, right? Of volunteering and going into these spheres of life to bring and anchor new abilities, and to eventually be able to share and teach that. So it's very complex at times, and even Jesus Christ told us this is very complex stuff. You just can't go at it in a linear fashion. That's why no one can tell you, yeah, you're doing a good job, or it will take this amount of time, right? So all of a sudden, I was called to start commanding these external energies that have been coming into my body through these experiments. And it's just like this, when something arises within you, this power, like Gandalf power, right? Thou shalt not pass. And it's like this Merlin archetype we all have within. We all hold that. We can connect to that and we can use it. And it was like that clear understanding that something that's not yours and doesn't belong to your body, you can command it to go out. And first you spiritually break through this, and you see through the veils what it is. You see the perpetrators, you see the ones who are doing these experiments, and healing is on all these levels, and it starts to bleed through every aspect and facet of reality. But eventually it comes down to physical healing, right? The body is a composite of certain elements, right? And it's a mixture of what I called physics, chemistry, and biology, right, all mixed together, and we get this physiology of the body that is responsive in a certain way. So I'm learning a lot about the body, but mostly from the spiritual perspective of deep compassion, this deep state of love. But at the same time, it's this light-filled life force intelligence that's based on currents of life force coming through, and each time they're going to automatically tell you what comes next. There's this next stage within the spiral. So it's not like a technical thing. It's not like something you do the same every day and it's repetitive. That's what multi-spectrum means, right? So yesterday I was pulled very strongly to command these energies to leave my body, and it was this like vehement, strong force, which was just simply this force of divine intelligence that was telling them it's time to go home, literally, because they're causing a negative effect on the body, right? So it's not just us getting rid of the influences and the influencers, but the energies themselves. Like, I know I have, my natural body's response was kind of resisting a lot of these energies, but some of them were planted in my body. Some of them came into the body. That's why it was responsive in such a way. And basically it's teaching me now to anchor these gifts, because it's like you have no choice. Like every day I have to sit, and it's even the pain itself is a powerful trigger, because without it, I wouldn't go as deep as I'm going these days. So I was sitting yesterday, and suddenly I feel this calling, and the energy was so intense. It wasn't like anger or rage. It was just like that knowing, ooh, this is a powerful force, and I commanded that all energies that weren't a part of my creation, that weren't part of my sovereign consciousness creating it, and they weren't created within my own body through love, that they have to leave and go back to their maker and their source. And it was like me sending them through a stargate and just sending them back, and I felt this powerful force, like a spiral, like zapping it out of me, like just as I was zapped coming in, and it was kind of like going out. And just a while ago, before, I received guidance that we're actually working on clearing the channels, because a lot of these life force channels that are, they're basically created at higher levels of our spirit body, so we don't just have this physical body. So they're created as a means for currents of life force to move through, and they're basically bringing us information. But this information has to be authentic to what needs to come through in each moment. It has to be in resonance with how much the body is open, how much the cells are open. And this was more invasive than it was loving, So after that, it was really strong pull suddenly I felt this guidance telling me that, you know, now it's time for replacements, this law of compensation, because a lot of times we forget that even though something might be invasive or inauthentic to the body, once it leaves, there's like a hole left there, right? Even the healers who are doing like healing work, they're going to have to repair the aura and close the space, right? Close the lid. So it's just called to work with color and bringing color to that space. And I work with green and pink. So today I went out in the sun. It was more like yellow, soft yellow, and then a little bit of orange tint to it, and feeling like the spiral of the sun embracing me. But then it was really fantastic because suddenly, right, because my pink goes through the entire left, it's like hemisphere, right? And it's like in my teeth and my jaw, and it goes through this cheekbone and like almost like here, sinuses, right? And goes into my eye socket. So and then sometimes this painful pinch through the head. It's like, ugh, you know, and sometimes it's a little more sneaky. Sometimes it comes back more distinctively. So it really shifts, you know, and I think that that's all part of this spiral. And it's like just following the currents of energy and learning how to really be with the body. It's been truly challenging, but it's, like I said, it's helping me to anchor these gifts. So today I work also with a lot of sound, but suddenly I got this guidance to open my mouth. And it's funny, right? I'm already taking in the sunlight and absorbing sun rays, but this was very much focused on opening the cavity, because we know a lot about like womb receiving sunlight, right? And when you're exposing when we as humans expose our sexual genitals, right, it's like we're taking in, and that's where a lot of calcium is created in the body, so it helps us with firm bone structure, right? But this was almost like the same thing. It's like open it up, you know, and receive, not just like through the skin, but directly through the mouth cavity. So I was doing like on the sun and there with the waterfall, so eventually the battery overheated. And so it was a really interesting process. And it was funny because then I remember just in the morning I saw this clip, and it was this part of the news, you know, now about the virus and everything, and it was President Trump and some informers, and he got this information from them how a certain amount of, you know, bringing light to the body, like UV light and even direct sunlight, helps the body, and it's like immediately creates this atmosphere of healing. And there was others, you know, sitting there as opposition doing like, we're not for that, you know, because no one wants that, right? The opposition doesn't want that. So it was like he was saying, why shouldn't we take this? Look at the facts, look at the numbers, right? You know, it's all out there. So it's interesting, right? Because these things were there since the beginning. And even in Atlantean times, before the fall, there was mostly work with, you know, different spectrums of color and sound and frequency. And I always go back to, was it Star Trek, right? You know, the doctor who had these almost like a little mini UV lamp looking machine, a device, and when there was someone ill and he came with him and he just did a little bit of the zzz, you know, person was fine all of a sudden. So it's like interesting what we're opening up to as we're anchoring higher levels of not just consciousness, but the integration of a specific density that's related to dimensional awareness and infusion. So I think this beautifully refers to the previous video I've done. So, you know, it's time for us to start talking to not just the body, but also the cells, and realizing how the cells, because in a way we're still part of this duality framework, have been for eons of time exposed to both the dark and the light. And that's why I guess our bodies created, you know, this habitat of smart cells, healthy cells as we call them, and cancer cells. So it's interesting, right? So this path, as you can see, of spiral healing through life force, understanding, divine intelligence, is leading us new places, of course. So I will also start teaching this. We're going to start with the first introductory level on Patreon. My page is called Ascension. If you will ever be guided to join, it's out there, it's available. So we'll see you there. And I think I'm going to say so now when it comes to ants. It is what it is. So thank you for listening today. I hope it was helpful, beneficial. Don't fear the sunlight, because, you know, it's very, very healing for the body. It's like exposing it to powerful radiation, but it's a good kind of radiation for the body, of course, if you're not overdoing it and overreacting, because you still have to listen to the body and its natural intelligence. So That's it for today. As always, with so much love, wisdom, and power. Sending greetings from me and nature, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.